The sun hung like a hammer in the sky, baking the dirt streets of Dead Horse Gulch until the ground cracked and shimmered. The town was sweltering and mean, the kind of place where even the flies moved slow. Men leaned against sun-bleached porch posts, sweat soaking their collars, eyes fixed on the makeshift auction block nailed to the front steps of the saloon. They weren't here for grain or horses. Today, they were selling people. The auctioneer Mick Farlow, a thin, toothless man with a voice like rusted, hinges cleared his throat and tapped the barrel beside him. Next up, one of our own, good with a needle, fair cook, quiet temperament mostly. A few chuckles rose from the crowd. Miss Willa Kavanaugh, starting Bidone dollar. Gasps scattered like gunfire across the square. A murmur swept through the townsfolk as a woman was led onto the platform. Her hands were bound with frayed rope. Her boots were worn down to leather slaps. A tear in her faded dress revealed a bruised knee, and her sunburned cheeks were streaked with dust and dignity. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just stood there with her chin tilted, eyes cast low, as if she'd already left her body behind. From the far end of the square, the sound of polished boots against hardpan interrupted the heat-soaked silence. Silas McGraw had just stepped off his horse when he caught sight of the auction block. His stride faltered. The townsfolk parted for him out of habit was tall, broad-shouldered, and rode with the quiet authority of a man used to owning land that stretched farther than most men could ride in a day. He stopped short as the woman on the platform lifted her face toward the sun, and something in him split in two. Time buckled. Her name echoed in his bones. Willa. Her hair, once the color of wheat in the wind, was dull and tangled now. Her eyes, those storm-gray eyes that once watched him fix fences and kiss her under the apple tree behind her father's barn, looked hollow. And still he knew. It was her. The girl he'd planned to marry. The girl who'd vanished without a goodbye 3 years ago. Silas didn't move. Couldn't. His heartbeat pounded like hooves in his ears as Mick Farlow called out again, "Do I hear a dollar?" Someone in the crowded, drunk ranch hand with a busted nose and mean eye shelled up a coin and shouted, "I'll take her." Laughter broke out. $1. For her. Silas's fists clenched at his sides, leather gloves creaking against calloused skin. He hadn't come back for this. He'd been away for 3 years, expanding his ranching empire, building a fortune in cattle and land, pushing the memory of Willa into the locked place behind his ribs. And now here she was in a block, like livestock, up for sale. He couldn't breathe. Her eyes skimmed the crowd again, slow, detached, and then, just for a heartbeat, they locked onto his. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, disbelief, shame. Then her gaze dropped just as fast. Silas took a step forward, and the dust rose around his boots. Something ugly was happening in Dead Horse Gulch. And if it had Willa Kavanaugh at the center of it, he'd be damned if he let it go on another minute. Silas didn't say a word. He couldn't. His throat felt like it had swallowed sand and grief all at once. He just stood there in the dirt, staring at the woman on the platform like she was a ghost risen in broad daylight. Willa didn't look at him again. Her head stayed bowed, strands of dirty blonde hair falling over her face in tangled wisps. But he could see her clearly now. The bruises on her forearms, dark and yellowing beneath thin, weather-worn skin. The chipped nail polish faded coral pink. The same shade she used to wear when they were young, when she'd flash those hands under the sun while laughing in the fields behind her daddy's old barn. Back when she'd dance barefoot in the river and tug him by the collar into wildflower meadows, just to lay in the grass and talk about forever. Forever had been 3 years ago. And then it vanished. No note, no goodbye, just gone. The auctioneer's voice cut back in, loud and grating, shattering the silence in Silas's head. "All right, folks, we got $1 roan dollar for this fine young lady. Do I hear two?" Silas didn't move, not a twitch. He was locked in place, his boots sunken into the dirt like roots. Part of him still didn't believe it, didn't want to believe it. The girl he once dreamed of building a life with, who used to wear Sunday dresses and smell like lavender soap, was now up there being bartered like a work mule. And not just any girl, Willa. Flashbacks clawed at him. Her face under the stars the night before he left for Abilene. The promise they made in whispers. The letter he sent 3 pages long, telling her he'd be back by fall. She never wrote back. Now he understood. She hadn't disappeared into another man's arms. She'd been swallowed by something crueler: poverty, loss, maybe even fear. And now she stood on that platform, hands bound, eyes empty, bones showing through a dress that hung off her like it belonged to someone else. "Come on now," the auctioneer barked. "She's young, strong, got some experience cooking at the boarding house. Someone gonna make me a better offer?" Laughter erupted from the crowd, some crude, some pitying. Then a man near the fronta squat, drunk with missing teeth and a whiskey-stained shirt, stumbled forward with a silver coin in hand. "I'll raise you 50 cents, he slurred. "She'll make a fine scrubber in my kitchen. Might even teach her to keep her mouth shut." The crowd howled. Silas's jaw flexed, his fists balled so tight his knuckles turned white. That man had just put a price on her dignity, and the town was treating it like a joke. Silas could feel the rage bubbling in his chest, thick and dangerous. But still he didn't speak, not yet. He kept staring at Willa, his heartbeat pounding in time with a throb in his temple. And he knew whatever had happened to her, whatever had broken her down this far, wasn't just bad luck. Someone had done this to her. And someone was about to pay. $1 going once, the auctioneer drawled, his voice bouncing off the warped wooden walls of the saloon. Going twice. Willa's head finally lifted. Her face turned toward the crowd, slow as a dying windmill, and her eyes scanned the sea of dirt-slick hats and smirking faces. Then they landed on Silas McGraw. And for a split second, just a single heartbeat time bent. Their eyes locked, and the years between them collapsed. Recognition surged like a lightning strike through her gaunt expression. Her breath caught visibly in her chest. The bruises on her arms, the dirt on her cheeks, the frayed hem of her dress, none of it could hide who she was. But her eyes, they were shattered now, haunted. And when the realization hit, her gaze flinched and dropped like she'd just stared straight into the sun. She looked away, quick, ashamed. The drunk man swayed proudly, waving his coin like it was gold. "That's a fair deal," he shouted, stumbling back into the crowd. $1 well spent." Laughter rippled through the square. It wasn't just cruel, it was casual, the kind of laughter people used when they'd long since stopped remembering the difference between right and wrong. The auctioneer nodded. "Sold for $1 too." Silas stepped forward. His boots hit the packed earth with force. His shadow fell across the platform, cutting through the sunlight like a storm cloud. And then came his voice, low, commanding, furious. $10,000. Everything stopped. Mouths froze mid-smirk. Laughter turned to stunned silence. Even the horses tied outside the saloon seemed to sense something had shifted. The air itself felt heavier. The auctioneer blinked. "What? What was that, sir?" Silas didn't blink. "I said $10,000. The drunkard looked confused, clutching his coin like it had suddenly betrayed him. The sheriff, Boone Carver, stiffened beside the platform, his hand moving instinctively toward his belt. And from the edge of the crowd, Wade Covington, slick-haired, sharp-suited, and smiling like a man who thought he'd already won, stepped forward with a slow clap. "Well now," Covington said, "that's a mighty generous bid for a girl who owes more than she's worth." Silas's eyes locked on him. "She's not property." Covington's grin faltered, just a bit. "This here's a debt auction, Mr. McGraw, legal and recognized. Her father owed me when he passed. She inherited the burden." She didn't inherit a damn thing but grief. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some eyes darting between Silas and Covington, unsure which man to side with. The heat seemed to rise another 10 degrees. "I'm not bidding for her labor," Silas said, his voice slow and deliberate. "I'm buying her freedom. I want the debt wiped clean. the chain's off, the contract burned. That money's yours, but she walks away. No, Covington snapped, the mask of civility slipping. You can't just waltz in here throwing money and calling it justice. I'm not asking, Silas said. The sheriff stepped forward, tension thick in the air. Gentlemen, maybe we should talk this through. But the line had already been drawn. And Dead Horse Gulch, for the first time in years, felt like it was on the verge of remembering what justice used to look like. Sheriff Boone Carver tugged at the brim of his hat, squinting into the midday sun as the murmurs around the auction stage rippled louder. The townsfolk had gone from amused to agitated, and Silas McGraw standing like a thundercloud ready to split the town in half was the cause of it all. Boone stepped forward, his boots grinding the dry dust underfoot. Silas, he said low, motioning the rancher to follow him behind the water trough on the edge of the square. Walk with me a minute. Silas didn't want to move. His eyes were still locked on Willa, still tethered to the platform like livestock, her shoulders tense and eyes down again, but he followed, just barely. When they were out of earshot, Boone sighed and hooked his thumbs through his belt. You're kicking up a storm you don't want any part of. Silas folded his arms across his chest, jaw tight. Explain to me how a woman like her ends up in chains for $1. Boone glanced toward the crowd before answering, voice low. Willa came back about a year after you left. Her daddy died, nothing left but a dry ranch and debt markers stacked higher than the barn roof. She tried to run it alone, but she ain't her old man. Couldn't hold on to a hired hand, couldn't keep the roof from sagging. She started borrowing from the wrong folks. Covington, Silas muttered. Boone nodded grimly. Wade owns half this town on paper now. Land, debts, silence. When Willa couldn't pay, he called it in. Said she agreed to work it off. Voluntarily. Voluntarily, Silas repeated, the words sharp in his mouth. Boone's eyes didn't waver. She signed. Or so Wade says. She agreed to the auction. Town sees it as fair, legal. Ain't no one forced her, not that I saw. Silas shook his head slowly, biting back the bile rising in his throat. I knew Willa Kavanaugh when she had nothing but pride and calluses. She'd break her own bones before she sold herself like that. Something stinks. Boone's face darkened. Silas, I'm telling you plain, leave it. I've seen what happens when a man starts prying into Covington's dealings. Papers disappear, witnesses forget. And folks end up face down in the gulch with a bottle in their pocket. Silas stepped closer, voice like gravel. You knew her family. You think she belongs on a platform with rope around her wrists? Boone flinched. Doesn't matter what I think. Law's been twisted so long around here it don't even remember its shape. You stir this up, you'll find yourself at the center of something a lot nastier than a crooked auction. Silas let the silence hang between them. Then, good. I've been away too long. About time someone stirred this damn place up. The sheriff's jaw tightened. You really want to throw down with Covington, you better be sure. Because if you go after him, he won't stop with court papers. He'll come after you. And her. Silas's eyes flicked back to Willa. She was still standing there, still tethered, still silent. Then let him try, Silas said. But she's not walking away from that platform alone, not this time. The moon hung low and heavy over Dead Horse Gulch, casting pale blue light over the stable behind Covington's saloon. The townsfolk had long since retreated to their lantern-lit parlors and poker tables, but Silas McGraw moved through the shadows like a man with unfinished business and fire in his chest. The stable door creaked as he opened it. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old hay, damp wood, and rusted iron. A single lantern burned low in the far corner. Willa sat on a pile of feed sacks, her arms wrapped around her knees, a thin blanket draped over her shoulders. Her eyes lifted when she heard him, but she didn't speak, just watched. She looked so small in that space, like a ghost tucked into a corner of the past. Her hair was tied back in a rough knot, and her dress still the same one from the auction hung loose on her frame. Her face was half hidden in shadow, but Silas saw the flicker in her eyes. Shame. And something else. Fear. Maybe not for herself. "You shouldn't be here," she said finally, her voice hoarse, like it hadn't been used in days. Silas stepped closer, careful, like she was a horse ready to bolt. "I came to see you, not the version on that platform, you." Willa shook her head and looked away. "That girl's gone." Silas crouched beside her. "Then tell me what happened. Let me help." She didn't answer. Her fingers picked at the edge of the blanket, trembling. Her eyes were glassy, distant, but he could see the walls inside her. The ones built by betrayal and survival, brick by brick. "I'll pay whatever Covington wants," Silas said. "I'll buy out the debt, end this." "No." The word came out sharp. She looked up, eyes blazing for a brief second. "You can't fix this with money." Silas's brow furrowed. "Why not?" "Because he won't let you," she whispered. "Because he wants this. Wants me ruined. Not paid off. There's more to it, Silas. He didn't just buy the debt. He made it up." Silas blinked. "What do you mean?" But she clammed up, lips pressed tight. Her hands pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. He stood slowly. "I'm going to find out, one way or another." Later that night, when the saloon had quieted and the moon had risen high, Silas crept around back to Covington's office. The window was loose, he'd noticed it earlier. It took little effort to slip inside. The room smelled of cigar smoke and old leather. Papers were stacked in neat little piles. Maps of the county pinned to the walls. In the center of the desk sat a thick brown ledger with a brass clasp. Silas opened it and scanned the pages. Debtor names, amounts, dates, payments, and signatures. He found Willa's Pagetwo debts listed under her name, one for $400 for cattle feed, another for $312 in ranch repairs, both signed by her. But the signature was wrong. Silas had held letters from Willa in his hand, had watched her sign her name 100 times. This wasn't hers, not even close. The handwriting was too heavy, too smooth. It had been traced. His heart pounded as he turned page after page. He recognized other names: widows, ranchers, former soldiers all with similar strange signatures. The ink even matched. Covington had forged them all. Built an empire on fake debt and fear. This wasn't business. It was trafficking. Silas's fingers tightened on the edge of the ledger. A storm was coming to Dead Horse Gulch and Wade Covington had just handed him the match. The morning came without warmth. A thin mist clung to the alleys of Dead Horse Gulch, veiling the town in silence. The saloon was quiet, its doors still locked, and the stable behind it stood like a forgotten shack at the edge of the world. Inside, Willa paced the hay-covered floor, jaw tight, eyes rimmed with red from a night spent fighting sleep. She heard the door open and didn't have to turn around to know it was Silas. "You should have stayed away," she said without facing him. "I couldn't," he answered, his voice low, steady. Willa spun around, fire in her eyes. "What are you doing here, Silas? Playing the hero? Dropping a pile of money to save the poor fallen girl who broke your heart?" He stepped forward, but she held up a hand to stop him. Her lips quivered, not from fear, but fury. "You don't get to ride back into my life with your clean boots and ranch money like nothing ever happened. You left." Silas stared at her for a moment, brow furrowing. "You think I left by choice?" "You disappeared," she said, her voice rising. "I waited, I wrote, and then I stopped writing, because nothing ever came back." Silas's breath hitched. "I wrote too, every month for nearly 2 years. Letters, packages. I thought you stopped caring." The silence that followed was so sharp it might have cut glass. Willa's expression shattered, her knees faltered, and she reached for the post behind her. "No," she whispered. "No, I never got one." "And I never got yours," Silas said. His voice wasn't angry now, just stunned, hollow with realization. Someone kept them from us. Willa slowly sank onto a stack of burlap sacks, her hands trembling as they covered her mouth. Covington, she said through her fingers. He was always there, always finding excuses to stop by, asking if I'd heard from you, telling me you were probably long gone with some rancher's daughter in Texas. Silas nodded, jaw clenched. He forged your debt. I saw the ledger. That man's been playing God in this town for too damn long. Willa let out a broken laugh, tears streaming down her face. He told me I was nothing without my father, that I'd be dust by spring if I didn't take his help. I thought I had no choice. She looked up at him, her eyes raw. You think you can save me now, Silas? After all this? I'm not the girl you left behind. I'm not bright-eyed or hopeful. I'm broken. So go, please. If you stay, you'll burn with me. Silas didn't move, not an inch. I'm not leaving, he said. Not now. Not when I finally understand the truth. Willa shook her head, but the weight in her shoulders gave her away. She wanted to believe him, desperately. He stepped closer, slowly, and dropped to one knee in front of her. They stole years from us, lied to both of us, but I'm here now, Willa, and I don't give a damn if the whole town burns. I'm not letting you go again. She covered her face, sobbing harder now, but she didn't tell him to leave. And for the first time since he returned, Silas felt the air shift. The fight had begun, and this time he wasn't fighting alone. The town square was quieter, this Tamino laughing crowd, no children pressed against dusty windows. Just a half-circle of chairs set beneath the saloon awning, where 5 men in dark coats sipped from flasks and waited with polished boots crossed and coin purses resting in their laps. Private buyers, brought in from neighboring counties. Each of them had come for one reason: to own a woman who'd already been sold once. Willa sat on the auction block again, wrists shackled with thick iron cuffs, her ankles chained to the leg of the stage. She kept her eyes down, unmoving. Her dress was cleaner now. Someone had washed it, but her spirit was still weighed down by the humiliation. The rusted chains weren't just for show this time. Covington had made sure of that. No more interruptions, he'd said. No more theatrics. Sheriff Carver stood off to the side, arms crossed, jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. He'd been paid. Bought clean, like an old saddle. Inside the saloon, Silas sat across from a man in a navy blue coat with gold buttons and the weariness of too many years on the road. Judge Eamon Halloran was just passing through on his way north to settle a disputed land boundary. But he had a name, a badge, and jurisdiction that outranked everyone in Dead Horse Gulch. Silas laid the ledger open across the table. Page 43, he said, voice taut with urgency. Willa Kavanaugh. And 30 other names just like hers. All forged. The judge adjusted his spectacles and skimmed the pages. His brows drew low. Who else has seen this? No one. Sheriff's in Covington's pocket. The mayor too, if he's still breathing. The judge shut the ledger slowly. If I make this public, Covington will run. And your girl, she may not live long enough to testify. I don't want you to stop it, Silas said. Not yet. I want you to watch it. Let them hang themselves, right there in the daylight. Then take it all. The judge leaned back, lips tightening. You're walking a tightrope, McGraw. Silas stood, folding the papers into his coat. Then I hope you brought a long rope. Outside, the auctioneer cleared his throat and called the gathering to order. Covington stood proudly beside the platform, arms open, as if he were hosting a summer picnic. Gentlemen, he said, we all know why we're here. One item, one time. Let's keep things civil and simple. Willa didn't flinch. She didn't cry, but inside, her pulse was a scream. She had seen Silas before dawn, slipping away from the stable with fire in his eyes. She didn't know what he planned, only that it involved risk, and that he was stubborn enough to follow through. Silas stepped from the shadows of the alley and crossed the square, every step echoing like a drumbeat. Covington's smile faltered. The buyers glanced around, uncertain. In the doorway of the sheriff's office, Judge Halloran lit a cigar and leaned casually against the frame, watching, waiting. The trap was set. The chains still rattled. But this time, Willa wasn't alone. And justice was about to find its footing. The heat came in waves that morning, rising off the cracked earth and settling like a fever on the shoulders of the dozen men gathered near the saloon steps. The chairs had been arranged in a tight semicircle, and each of the so-called buyers sat back in comfort, boots up, hats tilted low. Wade Covington stood on the platform with a self-satisfied smirk, hands behind his back like a showman about to unveil a prize-winning steer. Willa stood beside him, chained and silent. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes told a different story, like a dam ready to break. The crowd wasn't large this time. Word had gotten around that this was invitation only. But folks watched from windows and alleys, drawn by the whisper of something crooked in the open sun. "Let's begin," Covington announced, clearing his throat. "Strong frame, good temperament, light on her feet. Debt value starts at $2,000. A man in a gray silk suit, hair slicked back like riverstone, raised a gloved hand. "I'll offer 2,000. Covington beamed. "Thank you, Mr. Holbrook. Do I hear 25? Another man, older and fatter, grunted from the second row. 2,500. 3,000, Holbrook replied without looking up. Silas McGraw leaned against the water trough, arms crossed, watching every move with eyes like flint. His hat was low over his brow, but his shoulders were coiled like a drawn bowstring. He let the numbers climb. 3-5, 4, 4-5. 5,000, Holbrook called. Covington's grin split wider. 5,000 from our fine friend from Boston. Going once? Silas stepped forward. He didn't speak right away, just walked, slow and deliberate, until his boots hit the foot of the platform. Covington stiffened but kept smiling, though his eyes flickered. "Going twice," the auctioneer said, his voice uncertain. "She isn't yours to sell," Silas said. The square fell silent. Covington's eyes narrowed. "What's this now?" Silas reached into his coat and pulled out the thick brown ledger. "This is the book you built your empire on. Page after page of forged debt. Names of people you ruined, including hers." He tossed the ledger onto the platform, where it landed with a hollow thud. The buyers looked at one another. The auctioneer took a step back. Willa's eyes locked on the book, trembling. That was it. That was the proof. "She never signed anything," Silas said. "And you know it." Covington's face twitched, but he tried to recover. "That book's meaningless. You've no authority here." "No," said a voice from the back. Judge Halloran stepped forward, flicking ash from his cigar as he moved through the stunned crowd. "But I do." Covington pallid. "Those signatures will be matched. The debt's investigated. And if they're fake, your little auction house just turned into a criminal operation." Covington took a step back. Sheriff Carver, silent until now, finally drew his pistol and pointed it squarely at Covington's chest. "Don't move, Wade." Covington bolted. He didn't get far, made it halfway down the steps before Carver tackled him into the dirt. The buyers scattered like crows. Willa gasped as Silas rushed to the platform and took the keys from Covington's pocket. He unlocked her chains with shaking hands. "It's over," he whispered. But Willa knew better. The auction had ended, yes. But the reckoning had only just begun. The square erupted in chaos the moment the shot rang out. A sharp crack echoed off the dry wood and stone of Dead Horse Gulch, louder than any voice, louder than any truth shouted in court. For a moment, no one knew who had pulled the trigger, just the sound and the scream that followed. Covington hit the dirt with a howl, blood pouring from his thigh, staining the dust in dark crimson as he clawed at his leg. People screamed, ducked, scattered. The businessmen leapt from their chairs like startled cattle, one of them tripping backward over a barrel. Judge Halloran didn't flinch. Sheriff Boone Carver stood 10 feet away, still holding the smoking revolver, eyes locked on the man he'd just gunned down. "I won't hang for your crimes," Carver muttered, his voice dry as gravel. Covington writhed on the ground, the smugness drained from his face, replaced by animal panic. "Get a doctor," he wailed, spitting dust. "Somebody help me." Silas didn't move to help him. Neither did anyone else. The crowd that had watched the auction now watched justice with a strange mix of awe and quiet satisfaction. Judge Halloran stepped forward, kicking up a small cloud of dust as he reached the edge of the platform. "As of this moment, this auction is declared unlawful. Every debt contract issued under Wade Covington's authority is hereby suspended pending full investigation." He raised the ledger. "This document will serve as Exhibit A in multiple counts of fraud, coercion, and human trafficking. This town's dealings with Mr. Covington are over." There were no cheers, just a heavy silence, a deep collective breath being held after too many years of rot left unspoken. Willa's knees gave out, no warning, no sound. Her legs simply folded beneath her as the weight of it all crashed down, weeks of fear, chains, shame, and the poison of silence that had clung to her like second skin. Silas caught her before she hit the wood. He knelt with her in his arms, heart pounding, her hair brushing against his chest as she clung to the air with trembling fingers. "It's done," he whispered. "You're safe now." She shook her head, eyes shut tight. "I don't feel safe. I don't know how to feel anything." Silas wrapped both arms around her, holding her close, anchoring her to the moment. "You will," he said. "We'll find it again. Whatever they took from you, we'll take it back." She opened her eyes slowly, searching his face. "Why did you come back?" He could have lied, could have said it was the ranch, or business, or curiosity, but he didn't. "I didn't come back for land or money," he said softly. "I came back for you. Always for you." A tear slipped down her cheek. This time, it wasn't from fear. Covington groaned somewhere behind them as the sheriff hauled him to his feet in iron cuffs, but Willa didn't look back. She stared only at Silas, her fingers curling into his coat like she didn't quite believe he was real. He was. And for the first time, in a long, long while, so was hope. The wildflowers were blooming again. Not the kind you planted in neat rows, but the stubborn, sun-hungry kind that rose from dry soil and pushed through every crack in the earth. Willa walked among them now, bare hands brushing over the lavender sprigs and golden aster, her boots sinking into freshly tilled dirt behind Silas's ranch house. She wore a wide straw hat that shaded her cheeks and an apron smudged with soil, but her smile, soft and unguarded, had started to return. It had been 3 weeks since the auction was torn apart, 3 weeks since the chains came off. The town of Dead Horse Gulch hadn't just moved on, it had woken up. The platform in the square was burned the day after Covington's arrest. People brought chairs and matches and stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the old wood turn to ash in silence. No one clapped. It wasn't a celebration. It was a funeral for everything they'd allowed to grow rotten. Covington's ledger had led to a dozen arrests across 3 counties. His victims, men and women like Willa, once buried under fake debts and threats, were all freed. Their names cleared. Their dignity restored, piece by piece. Some left town, others stayed and rebuilt, but everyone remembered. And Willa. She stayed too. Not in the shadows, not behind anyone's walls. She lived now in the white ranch house at the top of the hill, where the sun reached the porch before it touched the town below. Silas had offered her the guest room, but she never used it. After the first night, she simply stayed. Not as a tenant, not as someone rescued, but as a partner. Each morning she woke before the sun, the way she used to when she was young, and she worked the gardens behind the house. She planted tomatoes, squash, beans, and wildflowers. She rebuilt the stone path from memory. She didn't talk much about what had happened, but she didn't hide from it either. She let it live beside her in the soil, in the ache of her muscles, in the silence between words. That evening, as the sky softened into shades of rose and amber, Willa sat on the porch beside Silas. He had a cup of coffee in one hand and her fingers in the other, and neither of them spoke for a long time. The wind tugged gently at the curtains behind them. The land stretched wide and quiet, as if it too had taken a breath. Finally, Willa turned to him. "I'm not the girl you used to love." Silas didn't flinch, didn't look away. "Good," he said. "She was brave, but you," he brought her hand to his lips. "You survived." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She leaned into him, kissed him, slow, steady, certain. They stayed like that as the sun slipped below the hills, the sky burning gold behind them. No more chains, no more silence. Just two people who had been broken, mended, and found their way back one wildflower at a time.